Hey everyone, it is Caslow, and with patch 6.2 all but done on the story front, I think it's time that we start looking forward to what might come next. As a quick refresher of 6.2, we arrive in the 13th, inside the castle Troia, where at the end we take on Scarmiglione, one of the four fiends from Final Fantasy IV. And actually we end up fighting him twice, once in the dungeon, and another time shortly thereafter in an instance duty. Between those two fights, however, we're introduced to a new character to our party, Zero. Zero was Zenos' Reaper Voidsent that we had to purify with the Crystal of Light. At first, she doesn't even claim to have a name, and instead Y'shtola has to give her one, the name Zero, meaning what Y'shtola says as beginning, but Zero counts as nothing. Then, during the second fight with Scarmiglione, Zero shows off her Memoriate powers. This is the power to turn fiends into crystals, and trapping their essence inside. From what we understand from the Warring Triad storyline, these crystals began to leak the essence of the fiends trapped inside and slowly corrupted their holders, turning them into the Voidsent that we know today. After defeating Scarmiglione and Zero sealing him away in a crystal, we retreat back to Zero's domain, kind of a home for misfit Voidsent. During this time, we get a big backstory on how the Voidsent actually work, which I'm going to talk about later when I talk about where the story may be going. But ultimately, what ends up happening is the second elemental fiend from Final Fantasy IV, Barbaricia, confronts the party. After defeating her in her trial, Zero also seals her into a crystal so that she can't reform. However, this drains Zero of her power, and we must return back to the source so that she can recover. For this video, I'm not going to talk more about what happens in the source with Zero, because I think just that little bit that we've got so far is what I need to kind of theorize where we could be going next. But first we have to look at what we know we're getting for the rest of the patch cycle. We at least know we're going to fight Rubicante and Cagnazzo, and it's strongly likely that we're going to fight Golbez and maybe a corrupted Azjaya, whom Golbez has enchained. On top of that, with 3 patches left, that means we have 3 dungeons, 3 trials, and a final duty that we tend to get with every 0.55 patch. This duty is usually pretty intricate, and I have an idea where it might be going, but we'll get to that in a second. Now, since we've already faced Scarmiglione and Barbaricia, I'd like to focus on the other 2 elemental fiends from Final Fantasy IV. First, we've got Cagnazzo, who is a water turtle fiend. In Final Fantasy IV, he actually disguised himself as the King of Baron. From that position of power, he was able to command Kain and Cecil to start acquiring the elemental crystals that Golbez was seeking. Then we've got Rubicante, who, the biggest thing that I remember from Final Fantasy IV is that he was probably the most honorable of the 4 fiends. But I don't know if he's going to be that honorable in Final Fantasy XIV, based upon what I will discuss later. But in the story of Final Fantasy IV, he attacked the Kingdom of Eblon, destroying most of the citizenry, including the king and queen, leaving only a small band of citizens and the prince, Edge, left to fight for the kingdom. After a grueling dungeon, when you're almost out of resources, you confront Rubicante, who does the honorable thing of healing your entire party to full before you fight him. Then we have Golbez and Azjaya. In Final Fantasy IV, Golbez had a shadow dragon that he tended to fight with in battles. So I think that might be the role that Azjaya will be playing, and why I think she will eventually be corrupted, if she's not corrupted already. Alright, turning back to Final Fantasy XIV. As I said earlier, when we're in Zero's domain, we get a big primer on the nature of Voidsent. Generally speaking, Voidsent seek out ether, and particularly in the 13th, the ether of other Voidsent. When one Voidsent takes on the ether of another, their minds begin to meld. And sometimes, depending on the circumstances, their forms can even change. Now, it's unlikely that change is limited to the absorption of Voidsent, because it was the absorption of ether from Azjaya that transformed the 4 fiends from normal Voidsent into the 4 fiends that we see in-game. We also learn that the death of a Voidsent causes their ether to disperse. Sometimes this leads to the Voidsent reforming itself, and sometimes it leads to the souls absorbed by the Voidsent reforming into their old selves. So what does this mean for where we're going? Well, the first thing is Zero. Many people have theorized that Zero might be a reference to Zeromus, the final boss of Final Fantasy IV. Zeromus is the malice that was inside a Lunarian named Zemus, that upon the defeat of Zemus sprung forth to fight the party in a kind of last-minute boss switch. But Zemus was behind everything in the game. He had mind-controlled Golbez. He was the leader of the four fiends that put them into Golbez's service. So he is the central antagonist, and Zeromus is kind of his malice at the end of the game. Which makes me think we might be leading somewhere that has Zero turn into Zeromus. But how we get there is the big question. And everybody has their own theories. But I think what we've learned about the Void lets me know what we're going to be doing. But before we get there, let's have some fun and look at what we might be seeing for the next few patches. During 6.2, we learned that Rubicante needed the help of Cagnazzo in attacking the Warrior of Light. I think this might come in the form of Cagnazzo having to either impersonate somebody. Particularly what I could see happening is the Warrior of Light, upon returning to the 13th, learns that Rubicante is making the move on a smaller kingdom of Voidsent. Inside that smaller kingdom of Voidsent, Cagnazzo will be present, hiding as a normal Voidsent. When the Warrior of Light arrives to fight off Rubicante, probably in some sort of dungeon, everything's okay. Rubicante retreats, the smaller kingdom seems to be okay. We start to talk with the Voidsent around, and then at some unsuspecting moment, Cagnazzo attacks the party, leading us to a trial for the patch. This would leave Rubicante for patch 6.4, which I think everybody is expecting he will at least be a trial, as he's probably the most popular of the four fiends. And I'm unsure what we'll do for the dungeon there, but I do have an idea for patch 6.5's dungeon. In some flashbacks in 6.2, we learn that Golbez, apparently, from what we can tell, has destroyed the Watcher on the 13th moon. This could be how Golbez got his original power, was absorbing the shard of Zodiac that was there. It could be that he's looking for something else on the moon. Maybe he's wanting to go through the Watcher's records. But this also could be the access to Golbez's throne. And we may have to fight through a dungeon to get to that throne. Looking through enemies of Final Fantasy IV, I think this would be a great opportunity to introduce the Lunasaurs as a boss. They were skeleton-like dragons that served as a treasure chest boss in the Lunar Subterrane final dungeon. There were actually several of them. Most of them we've already seen, such as Araman. There was one that was just a clone of Leviathan, so a lot of these aren't that interesting to use, but I think Lunasaurs were unique enough and stuck out enough that they'd make the perfect dungeon boss. And then I think we fight Golbez and a corrupted Asjaya together the same way that we fight Golbez and the Shadow Dragon in Final Fantasy IV. And this all leads to our big duty at the end of patch 6.55. We have a very wounded, very corrupted Asjaya, having lost a ton of ether to the four fiends. It might be that some of Asjaya's personality actually got absorbed from them, and so there's pieces of her memory that are just lost to her. So how do we repair that? Well, we've been given all the tools. We have a Voidsent in the form of Zero, who can absorb the ether of other Voidsent, though she has not done so. And then the idea that once all that absorbed ether is dispersed, the individuals can begin to reform themselves. So I think the final duty is going to be, first is going to be a rematch against the four fiends in a weakened state after Zero summons them back from the crystals she's been putting them in. And then a fight against the corrupted Asjaya, and Zero's going to absorb the ether of all five of those. And then ask us to kill her so that she can then reform and they can all reform on their own, with the four fiends reforming in their weakened state. But something goes wrong. The malice of the four fiends corrupt Zero, transforming her into Zeromus. Now I don't know if we might defeat Zeromus there. Maybe they'll give her a different name and she becomes the antagonist for the next expansion, fleeing back to the source somehow. But that is my game plan for where the Zeromus endgame is in Endwalker. But we will just have to see over the next year and a half. Alright guys, thanks for watching. Like I said, this is Caslow. I do theory crafting videos on Final Fantasy XIV. I do have some lore videos that I'm working on that I've just put off for way too long. I also stream some over on Twitch, where there's a link in the description below, as well as links to my social media and a link to my Discord channel if you want to be part of the daily community. But if you want to see more videos like this, the best thing you could do is click subscribe and maybe ring that bell as well. That way they're in your feed as soon as they're released. But I've got to get out of here, so I will see you all next time. Take care.